Okay, this is from Hunger, chapter 14, and we're having a book launch on Sunday at the House of Love and Fear, and I'll give directions to anybody who's interested in coming to that book launch on Sunday at the House of Love and Fear. I'm going to read from Hunger, and I'm reading the 14th chapter of Hunger. The next morning, Jack and Shanti woke up to the sun shining high in the sky. Jack quickly pulled on his sneakers after all. The two had fallen asleep in their clothes from the night before. Jack was to meet Spike David just after noon at the Futures Cafe restaurant. He kissed his girl Shanti on the brow and quietly said goodbye to her. Like an angel, she lay drowsily on the futon bed in the fetal position, a rare posture for her to be sleeping in. Suddenly, the image came to mind that Shanti was sleeping with a baby cradled in her arms. She was suckling at it, at her teat, nursing the child. Jack rubbed his eyes wearily, turning around at this image. Then suddenly he realized that the baby was himself, a youngster in the woman's arms. The young child grew into the relief of a young man, wrapped in the womb, enclosed by her arms and kneeling legs. One last time, Jack rubbed his eyes with his sleeve, and stunned he looked again. There was nothing. The child, the young man, had vanished. Astonished, Jack pulled up his trousers and quietly shut the door behind him, making his way up to the restaurant at Bloor. Running through his mind as he dashed up towards Bloor Street Futures was Leonard Cohen's lines, "I'm living with a woman and a child and the situation is making me kind of nervous." It must have been the hallucination that he had seen as he departed the house of the child that he had left in Shanti's arms. Nonetheless, he kept his mild demeanor as he carried his saxophone case up the lane. On the patio, he met with David Spike, who was nursing a coffee at the table. Walking through the gateway into the restaurant, he flagged David's attention, waving at him. Catching his companion's view, he pulled up a chair to the table overlooking the street. David Spike was facing northbound onto Bloor, and Jack sat tight at the table looking southbound. When the waitress came by, he ordered a coffee and she asked if he would like to eat anything. He drowsily refused, and then she returned into the restaurant to grab him his coffee. Jack sat the saxophone case beside the table, and Spike's drums were positioned behind his chair. "Today, Jack," Spike began, "we sacrifice the music. That means that we make it sacred. So there should be no thought in your mind but for the music itself." Jack looked a little miffed by the comment, so he asked further in the conversation, "What exactly do you mean by this, David?" "It's a kind of Buddhism," Spike continued. "No mind, only action." "But I thought Buddhism was an enlightenment of the mind," Jack Dixon continued. "It is," Spike continued, "but at the same time it's a sacrifice of the mind." "Very well," Dixon continued humbly. "I guess I'll find a self-actualization of this in time." And then he thought, mind only, no mind. I don't know how to make heads or tails of the position. Then Spike interrupted Jack's train of thought. "Music must be made so that the offering is present spiritually through material means. It is a spiritualized materialism. But there comes a point where you cannot even begin to understand or speak of such things." At that point, the waitress came back to the table, returning with Jack's coffee. He thanked the waitress and sipped slowly at the brown liquid. The two musicians decided to take their coffees with them, walking east along Bloor Street to Yorkville. Fortunately, Spike had finished his coffee, for he couldn't take it with him on the road while carrying his heavy drums. Jack paid for his bill with enough cash for a good tip. Then, reaching for his saxophone, he grabbed his coffee, and the two young musicians split down the road. "What am I going to play?" thought Jack as he ambled down the road. He thought he heard Spike, who was walking a little further ahead of him, say, "Never mind." But then he gathered it must have been all the drugs in his system making him imagine a ghost in the air. Catching up to David Spike along the street, Jack began to think about what his Shanti had told him about the Tao, about the way. Like the anima and animus, the yin and the yang, the male and female principles, the black and the white would govern the state of affairs in Jack's mind. Day and night knew the answer to the question of the dreams he had been having in his mind. Challenged by his new discovery of entering the serial mindset, he knew that only the Supreme could be on its way as an answer to the Apollonian and Dionysian elements in his psyche. White light, black power was the answer to his growing tendency towards Robert Wilson's declaration of the autistic theater. He had the music he was musing on his way, but did he know the answer and the visual matrix that would lead to outing the best of his manhood? He wished he had a scribbler in the air, so that he could paint what he dared not lose or elucidate on his way. But still his mental life could still not stop ticking. What was the sacrifice of this music that he had known by Coltrane's Music in the Head? As he walked along with his new acquaintance, his heart began to sag with every beating thought in his chest. As the tune began to lift in his mind, predicating what he might play for the improvisation of jazz in the Yorkville area, Spike acquiesced and called him to a psychological sunrise. "You seem to be lost in reverie, young Jedi," Spike declared. "Let me help you out." "By this, what do you mean?" Jack Dixon declared. "I'm sure you know that all good things come about in time. We march along our given paths, seemingly autonomous from one another, but in the end it is our communion that makes us groove and tick. It separates us from the beasts. Then again, true autonomy is hard to find and make manifest, but the woman in us makes us turn inward to one another." And then Spike swallowed. Sangha, Sangha, Sangha resonated through the air, so mercurial that Jack only caught a glyph in the air, an image of the Om which he knew was not what it was or how to deal with. In the end, it is your community that helps you get by. Be careful not to be so bold as to try to conquer the world in your mind and in your heart. And then Spike began to whistle. "He's got the whole world in his hands," Jack laughed joyfully. "Why, thanks for your insight." "Power hoarding and compassion, that is the yin and yang of things," Spike spoke as he walked east along Bloor Street. "But still, you must take some time for your mind to rest. But you are a master. I'm sure that you have knowledge of such things. Let me put it to you this way," Spike continued. "I'm giving you a good dose of my wisdom. And these things don't come cheap. All the news that's fit to print," he eviscerated.